Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're continuing our set review series for Phyrexia, All Will Be One. Today we're covering all of the artifacts. And so I think we'll just go ahead and just jump right into it. We're starting with the commons first. And our first card is going to be the Basilica Spellbomb. And it looks like they have a Spellbomb, or Basilica Skull Bomb, sorry. Keep thinking of the spell bombs from the original Scars of Mirrodin set, I believe that's what it was. But they have one for each color. This is the one for white, and it reads Basilica Skull Bomb for 1. It's an artifact. You can pay 1, sacrifice Basilica Skull Bomb to draw a card. Or you can pay 2 and a white and sacrifice Basilica Skull Bomb. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. Draw a card. And you can activate only as a sorcery. So I do like the draw card, or pay 1, sack it to draw a card. You can do that at instant speed. That's always something that's good to do. I'm not a really big fan of the +2/+2 bonus and giving it flying. Unfortunately, if you were to use this and target one of your creatures and they had a removal spell to remove it from the battlefield, as this ability resolves, you won't draw the card either. So it's just a big loss there. However, it doesn't mean it's totally useless. I mean, you're going to be able to use it from time to time, but that's just one downfall you'll have to be aware of when you're using it. Because of that, I think I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. I think it's going to be in heavy competition with some other cards for a card slot in your draft or sealed deck. I mean, if you're able to use it, more power to you. You might have a deck that's relies on artifact triggers entering the battlefield or leaving the battlefield, and that's where it could be of a real help. Or just a really good aggro deck that this could work in. But I think overall, I'd probably just give it a low rating. And the same thing for constructed. It's just too limited in its scope to really make a solid impact for the constructed decks. So, like I said, though, unless you need some cheap artifacts to contribute to some kind of effects you have going for those decks, that's the only way I could really see it making the cut. But I think for now I'll probably just go low for both limited and constructed for it. Our next card is the Dross Skull Bomb for 1 colorless. It's an artifact. Same thing, you can pay 1, sack it to draw a card, or you can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice Dross Skull Bomb. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery. Now, actually, I do kind of like this one a little bit better, especially in limited, just due to the fact that it doesn't rely, well, it actually does rely on a target in your graveyard, but those graveyard removal effects are a little rarer than a standard creature removal that we saw that could impact the white Skull Bomb. So I think this is actually not a bad card for limited. You could use it to get a creature back from your graveyard to your hand, plus you get to draw a card off of it. And also, if you have a deck that utilizes sacrificing or artifacts entering the battlefield, this might be a handy utility tool for it. So I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I like it. I think it's going to find some good uses in some of the limited draft decks or sealed decks. For constructed, though, same thing as the previous Skull Bomb, just kind of limited in its scope. It's kind of slow, the fact that you can only use the second ability as a sorcery. It is a good card draw, and it is a good cheap artifact you can use if your deck is built around having lots of cheap artifacts and stuff. Then it might be a little bit better than the low rating, but overall I think I'll go low for it for constructed. Our next common is Dune Mover for 2. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem. It has Toxic 1, and just as a reminder, Toxic 1 is players dealt combat damage by this creature also get a poison counter. And the Toxic 1, the 1 value varies. Some creatures have Toxic 2, some creatures have Toxic 4, and you would get the corresponding poison counters equal to that Toxic value. So if they have Toxic 6, for example, and they deal combat damage, you'll get 6 poison counters. So for Dune Mover, though, it has Toxic 1. It's a 2/1 power and toughness, and when Dune Mover enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and then shuffle and put that card on top of the library. Not bad. I think this could be a filler if you needed it. But overall, I think I'd probably just give it a low rating for limited. I think there's other creatures that are going to be more dynamic with the toxic ability, and the fact that the basic land goes to the top of your library instead of into your hand, that's kind of a downside to it. So, plus it's kind of got a flimsy power and toughness. Could die pretty easily. Once again, this could fit into a sacrifice deck or a deck that relies on cheap artifacts, entering the battlefield or leaving the battlefield, going to the graveyard. That could be a plus for it. But overall, though, I think the overall range of this card is somewhat limited. So I think I'll probably go low for constructed as well for it. Our next card is Furnace Skull Bomb for 1 colorless. It's an artifact. Once again, you can pay 1, sacrifice it to draw a card, or you can pay 1 and a red and sacrifice the Furnace Skull Bomb to put 2 oil counters on target artifact or creature you control. Then you can draw a card. Once again, this is a card that does have reliability on having its target still be on the battlefield in order for its second ability to resolve. Oil counters are good in this format, especially probably in limited more so, just due to the fact that I looked and there are no cards that give +1/+1 counters in this set. But there are a ton of cards that do oil counters, and in some instances, oil counters kind of act as bonuses that give similar effects like +1/+1 counters. That's something to keep in mind. But overall, I think it's a good utility card. I kind of want to give it a mid-range rating for limited, just due to the fact that it does contribute oil counters on an artifact or creature, plus you can draw a card. However, the downside is if either of those targets are removed before the spell resolves, you get nothing out of it. So that's just something to keep in mind. For limited, for constructed, I'll go a low rating. I don't think you're going to see as much use for the oil counters in constructed unless you're building a dedicated oil deck, some kind of Phyrexian oil, toxic, poisonous deck, something like that, where you can proliferate. But other than that, it's probably just a low-end artifact for constructed. Our next common is Maze Skull Bomb for 1. It's 1 sacrifice Maze Skull Bomb to draw a card, and then its second ability is 2 and a green, sacrifice Maze Skull Bomb. Target creature you control gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn, and then you can draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Once again, same thing as the White Skull Bomb, except it's just green and it gives the creature +3/+3 and trample instead of the +2/+2 and flying. Same thing, I'm going to give it a low rating across the board for limited and constructed, all for the same reasons as why I said about the White Skull Bomb. Just half the time or sometimes you can get it to resolve, other times you might get your creature removed before this resolved and end up not being able to get the results of the ability. So low across the board for limited and constructed for the Maze Skull Bomb. Next is Mirror Custodian for 3. It's an artifact creature, a mirror. 2/3 power and toughness. When Mirror Custodian enters the battlefield, scry 2, then each opponent can scry 1. Not bad. I think it's a decent body. 2/3 lets you scry, manipulate your draws. Of course, has the downside of letting your opponent do the same in a smaller scry range, but it's not bad. I think I'll give it a low rating for limited, low for constructed. I think there's probably going to be other cards that you might want to put in place of this if you have them. If not, it's a good body that fills a slot for you. But overall, I think I'll probably go low across the board for the Mirror Custodian. Our next common is Mirror Kinsmith for 4. It's an artifact creature and it's a mirror. 3/1 power and toughness. When Mirror Kinsmith enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a mirror card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. So I did some checking on the number of mirrors that are in the Phyrexia All Will Be One set, and there's only 3 of them. 2 of them at common, 1 at uncommon, and we just seen the 2 common cards. So I think this is somewhat limited in range and what you can get out of it for a limited card. However, I think it could be more useful in a tribal mirror deck for constructed. So I think I'm going to go ahead and give it a low range or low grade for limited, just due to the fact it's a 3/1 for 4, it does let you go get a mirror, but oftentimes you're not going to be having a mirror card in the limited. For constructed, I'll go low as well, but I would probably maybe give it a mid-level rating if you're in a dedicated mirror tribal deck. I think it could serve a pretty good usefulness there to get some kind of high-end mirror card that helps you develop your board or helps you flesh out your strategy. So, but overall though, in its range, I'll go low for limited and constructed, with the note that it might be a bit mid-range card in a dedicated tribal deck for constructed. Our next common is Phyrexia Atlas. It's an artifact for 3. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and then it has Corrupted. When Phyrexia Atlas becomes tapped, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters loses 1 life. Not bad, pretty decent, good mana rock, with a little poisonous side effect, corrupted side effect, that can ping your opponents. However, I think I'm gonna, unless you're really stretching the envelope and going with maybe a 3-color deck, or you have some kind of deck that requires more than 2 colored mana for its spells, I would probably stick with the low rating for limited for Phyrexia Atlas. I think this might see more play in Commander, just due to the fact that your slots in limited, just like in most constructed decks that are not Commander decks, really compete for those slots, and I just don't think this would make it. However, for Commander or constructed, still same thing, go low, but Commander I might give it a mid-level rating in a dedicated corrupt deck or something like that, because you'll be pinging your opponents every time you tap this for mana. So, but overall, I think I'll give it a low rating across the board. Our next common is Prophetic Prism. It's a reprint. This has been in several sets, but looks like it's made it into this set as well. So Prophetic Prism for 2, it's an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you can draw a card, and you can pay 1 and tap, and add 1 mana of any color. Yeah, it's a good utility card, a good cantrip card that you can use. Might be pretty decent for some fixing. I'll give it a mid rating for limited. I think it might find some use there, and just the fact that you get to draw a card off of it, that's be pretty good. For constructed, unless you're playing a Commander deck, I think overall I'll give it a low rating. I think it could be helpful in smoothing your mana in Commander, but in a regular, standard, Pioneer, Modern, Legacy deck, it's going to really compete for slots unless you're playing a dedicated artifact style deck. Mid for limited and low for constructed. Our next common is Surgical Skull Bomb. It's the blue one. For 1, you can pay 1, sacrifice it to draw a card. Or you can pay 2 in a blue and sacrifice Surgical Skull Bomb to return target creature to its owner's hand, and you draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, that activate only as a sorcery is a real drawback for all these Skull Bomb cards, just due to the fact that all they have to do is bounce a card, or bounce a creature in response to it, remove a creature in response to it. You're going to end up sinking mana into it, and it's not going to resolve. So, still a low rating for this for the limited formats, and same thing for constructed. It will have its usefulness, but it's going to be very limited in both formats. So we'll go low across the board for the Surgical Skull Bomb. Okay, so now we're moving on to the uncommons. And our first uncommon is Atraxis Skitterfang for 3. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian insect, 2/2 power and toughness. Atraxis Skitterfang enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. So there's some oil references there. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may remove an oil counter from Atraxis Skitterfang. When you do, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink until end of turn. Interesting use for those cards. This strikes me as kind of a utility creature for the oil counters. The cool thing is about this card is you don't necessarily have to attack with the Skitterfang. You can actually just put an oil counter on another creature and give it flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink. Or you can just put it on it or use it on itself. Yeah, let's see here. So I think it's not a bad card. It's definitely a utility card. Somewhat of a foot soldier of a creature. I think I'm going to give it a... I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. The power and toughness is kind of the drawback for me on it. It's a little weak. I think it could probably die pretty easily. You might maybe only get 1 or 2 attacks out of it. But could be used actually to force in some damage, though, if you gave it death touch or if you're able to fly over with it. So something to think about there. But yeah, I think I'll probably just, my instincts tell me a low rating across the board for limited and constructed for the Skitterfang. I don't think it's going to make too big of an impact, but it will be a good foot soldier for your attacking your opponents in a limited and constructed. Our next uncommon is Ickerplate Golem for 3. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem, 2/3 power and toughness. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it has 1 or more oil counters on it, put an oil counter on it. So actually, this would go pretty well with the Skitterfang we just reviewed there. Creatures you control with the oil counters on them get +1/+1. That's cool. So it gives a bonus for having oil counters on it. That's always a plus. I think that's pretty solid. There's quite a few cards I've seen in this set that do utilize having oil counters on them. So I think it's a decent card for limited. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. And for constructed, unless you're in a dedicated oil deck, I think I'll probably just go a low rating on it. It's got to be somewhat of a focused deck in order for this to really make a high impact with it. And but if you're playing a lot of oil, you'll get an additional counter when it enters the other creatures enter the battlefield with it. So go mid for limited and low for constructed for the Ickerplate Golem. Our next card is Mirror Convert for 2. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian Mirror, 2/1 power and toughness. Has Toxic 1, and you can tap to pay 2 life to add 1 mana of any color. This is the last mirror in the set, so the third one, and I love the artwork for it. It's pretty cool. It's pretty much just a mana rock with 2/1 power and toughness attached to it. Does have Toxic 1, so that's not bad. It does have some use, but paying 2 life to add 1 mana of any color, that can be kind of steep sometimes. I mean, it's good for some fixing every once in a while, but I think, yeah, and it's 2/1 power and toughness. It is a 2-drop though, and that might be pretty good in limited, depending on how fast this format is. I'm going to give it a low rating though for limited, and I'll do the same thing for constructed. I could be wrong about that, but my initial assessment is that it's probably just a little bit too weak on its toughness side in order to make a heavy impact. However, if you are able to get in some early hits with it with a toxic, that might be pretty good. But for now, I think I'll probably give it a low rating across the board for the Mirror Convert. Next up is Prosthetic Injector for 1. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +0/+2 and has Toxic 1. And equip 1. That's not bad. Equipment seems to be a pretty solid sub-theme in this set as well. So, and it can give a creature toxic. So I kind of like it. It boosts the toughnesses of creatures. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. I think it might have some decent use in this format. For constructed, probably go a low rating on it, just due to the fact that unless you're playing in some kind of dedicated artifact or toxic poison deck, it might have limited uses, but I do like it for limited though. I think it can make an impact on the board. So we'll go mid and low for Prosthetic Injector. Next up is Ribskiff for 4. It's an artifact vehicle, Toxic 2. That means when it deals damage, it'll put 2 poison counters on the player. When Ribskiff enters the battlefield, you can draw a card, and it's 3 to crew and a 4/4 power and toughness. Not bad. I think that's pretty solid for limited. Toxic 2, you draw a card, decent body and power and toughness for it for 4, and it's 3 to crew. Not bad. I think it's worthy of a mid rating for limited. Constructed, I don't think it'll see much play as a vehicle. There are other vehicles that are a little bit better for 4 mana, but still, if you're playing a dedicated poison deck, poison counter deck, this might be pretty good. Plus you get to draw a card off it, so. But overall, I think we'll go low for constructed. Okay, so moving on to the rares now, it looks like. And our first rare is Argentum Masticore. Artifact creature, Phyrexian Masticore. 5/5 power and toughness. First strike, protection from multicolored. That's pretty strong. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Argentum Masticore unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. Yeah, that could be pretty good. You just got to have a consistent, decent-sized, 3-4 mana range cards to discard. You could really do some damage with this. I like the fact that it's just a 5/5 body for first strike, and it's protection from multicolored. That's pretty solid. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. I like it. I think it, if it can stick onto the battlefield for a few turns, you might be able to clear the board enough to get through and deal some major damage with it. So, pretty solid card. Just due to the fact that it's a 5/5 first strike, that's solid. For constructed though, I think probably give it a mid rating. I think it's a little tougher to keep on the battlefield. Your opponents are going to have a lot of removal possibly to take care of it and get rid of it. However, you might be able to at least get one permanent off the board if you discard a card that's an on-land card that or a card that actually has a mana value to it to take out something that your opponents have. But yeah, it's a pretty cool card. I love the artwork for it too. Pretty solid, but I think it's going to have more success in limited than it will in constructed. So we'll go high for limited, mid for constructed for the Argentum Masticore. Our next rare is Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut for 8. The legendary artifact creature Juggernaut, 7/5 power and toughness. Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls. And then other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are Juggernauts in addition to their other creature types. So yeah, so pretty much turns all your creatures into Juggernauts. That could be a good card to use, to swing with, to deliver like some knockout punches in the end. I think if this card sticks around too long, though, you could end up being forced to attack your way into a disadvantage. But overall, I think this is going to have so much power, so much impact with making your creatures 5/3 that you might be able to just swing for lethal with this card on the battlefield. So, plus it's a 7/5. That's a pretty big Juggernaut. Pretty solid. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited, and same thing for constructed. However, on the note on the mid rating, I think it'll have more of an impact in a commander deck or something like that, or maybe a heavy, maybe even a token deck. You got a lot of tokens. You throw this on the battlefield, all of a sudden become 5/3s. That's something to keep in mind. Turn all your little human soldier tokens or might tokens into 5/3s. It can be pretty deadly. So I think we'll go mid across the board for limited and constructed for Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut. Our next card is Mirren's Safe House for 3. It's an artifact. As long as Mirren's Safe House is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all land cards in all graveyards. Interesting. That can be a pretty useful card. You get some pretty decent non-basics in the graveyard, and can tap them. This could tap for any of those colors. You could also use any of their other activated abilities. That could be pretty useful. And doesn't have a limit on it either. That's pretty solid. A good example would be those sphere cards that are commons that if you sack them, you can draw a card. Maybe if you needed to draw another card, you could end up having to use that activated ability to sacrifice the safe house as a last-ditch attempt to draw a card or something like that. Or maybe some of the other non-basics that you might be able to use their activated abilities. So pretty decent. I like the idea behind it. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited, and I think I'll do the same thing for constructed. Yeah, I think it will probably go mid for constructed. I kind of was debating if I should make it a high rating, but I think most often it'll be more of a utility artifact than one that you feature around your deck building. unless you're in a dedicated artifact deck or some kind of combo deck or toolbox deck that this could really shine in. But overall, I think I'll probably go mid for constructed and mid for limited for the Mirren Safe House. Our next card is the Monument to Perfection. It's for 2. It's an artifact. You can pay 3 and tap it to search your library for a basic, sphere, or locust land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. That's pretty good. Actually, that could be quite useful. And then you can pay 3, and then Monument to Perfection becomes a 9/9 Phyrexian construct artifact creature. It loses all abilities and gains Indestructible and Toxic 9. Activate only if there are 9 or more lands with different names among the basic, sphere, or locust lands you control. Huh, interesting. Has a pretty low activated ability cost, but you do have to have 9 cards with different names among those different or land types. But it does let you filter those cards out of your library and put them into your hand. Helps you with your land drops. Wow, it's quite an interesting card. Looks like it is gonna take a little bit of time for setup unless you're in a ramp deck though. I think I'll probably go low for limited. It's a mixed opinion on this. I mean, you're gonna have to have 9 different different land names in order for you to really pull off the 9/9 creature. However, for constructed, I think you could really get a solid mixture of lands to be able to pull this off. However, it does have like I said, it does take a while for it to get that to happen. Unless you're ramping lands out onto the battlefield right away through ramping spells, it's going to take a little bit of time. That's the only reason I'd probably give it a mid. Otherwise, I'd give it high. But like I said, it also does help with its first ability helps you get cards out of your library pretty quickly. So we'll go low for limited, mid for constructed. I could be wrong, could be a little conservative in these ratings, but we'll have to see as time goes on. But I like the idea behind the card. It's pretty original. Love the artwork as well. Our next artifact rare is Soulless Jailer for 2. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. I like this. Give it a mid rating for limited. There's some cards in this set that can be utilized from the graveyard. I think this will put a stop to those. So I think it's got some good utility uses for limited. For constructed, same thing. I think it's pretty decent. You're going to be able to stop a lot of strategies with this. It's a good sideboard card. That's why I'd give it mid. Probably not something I'd start in the main deck, but it's definitely something I would sideboard in if I'm going against a deck that has a lot of recursion, utilizing its graveyard as a resource. So we'll go mid across the board for limited constructed for a Soulless Jailer. Our next rare is Tablet of Completion for 2. It's an artifact. You can tap it to put an oil counter on Tablet of Completion. Or you can tap it to add colorless. Activate only if Tablet of Completion has 2 or more oil counters on it. And then you can pay 1 and tap to draw a card. Activate only if Tablet of Completion has 5 or more oil counters on it. This is a pretty interesting utility card. This is something I could see really shining in Commander. For limited, I think it's good for ramping. I'm going to give it a low rating, though, for limited. I think there's going to be other things you're going to want to be using for this card slot. Unless you're playing some kind of mid-range control deck that you happen to be building for limited. I don't think it'll make the cut that often. For constructed, I think this will really shine in Commander. Probably the most of the time you'll see it do its best in Commander. For something like Standard or Pioneer, Modern, or Legacy, you probably have to be playing some kind of control deck or dedicated artifact deck to really get the most use out of this. But we'll see. I've seen other cards similar to this get some good use out of it. So, but I think I'll go mid for the rating for it for constructed for now. So we'll go low and mid for the Tablet of Completion. the Phylguri Silex. For 2, it's a legendary artifact. You can tap to put an oil counter on the Phylguri Silex. Then you can tap it to sacrifice the Phylguri Silex to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters on Phylguri Silex. Or you can tap it to remove 10 oil counters from among permanents you control and sacrifice the Phylguri Silex. It deals 10 damage to any target. Kind of an interesting take on the Silex card that destroys a lot of stuff. It's interesting middle ability where you can sack it to destroy a non-land permanent that has equal value to the number of oil counters on it. Similar to the what was it, the Blast Zone, or the land from War of the Spark. It's also in the Brothers' War. Very similar effect. Or the fact that if you have oil counters on other things, you can use it to remove those counters from among permanents you control to deal 10 damage to any target. That could be a game ender right away. Pretty decent. It's a 2-drop, so you can start using it right away, pretty early in the game. I think I'm going to give it I'll give it a high rating. Sorry, high rating for limited. And I think I'll do the same thing for constructed. I think this could find some pretty good use. It's a cheap artifact that can become deadlier the more oil counters get on there, and strategically can be used to take out a certain range of mana values, and it could be a game ender once it has 10 or more. Once you control 10 or more oil counters from among your permanents you control. So pretty cool card. I like it. Love the artwork too. It's pretty cool card design. High across the board for it. I think this might be our last rare. We're into the Z's now. It's a Zenith Chronicler for 2. Artifact creature, Phyrexian construct. 3/1 power and toughness. Whenever a player casts their first multicolored spell each turn, each other player draws a card. I think this will see the most play in Commander. Your opponents are playing multicolored stuff. You can use this to draw cards, or they could actually use it against you if if they have it on their board and you have a lot of multicolored cards. So something to think about there. I don't think it's going to see too much play in limited. Give it a low rating for limited, and I'll give it a mid rating for constructed. I mean, throughout the history of Magic, there's quite a few multicolored decks, and this is a good card to draw cards from it if your opponents are playing multicolored spells. So I think it'll really shine in Commander, though. So we'll go low for limited and mid for constructed. So we're on to the Mythic Rares now. And our first Mythic Rare is Staff of Completion for 3. It's an artifact. You can pay tap it to pay 1 life to destroy target permanent you own. Interesting. You can tap it to pay 2 life, add 1 mana of any color. Kind of steep there. Tap it to pay 3 life to proliferate. That actually might be worth it. Or you can tap it and pay 4 life to draw a card. Ooh, that's expensive. Or you can pay 5 colors to untap Staff of Completion. I think in the right type of deck, this card could be pretty crazy, especially in Commander. So you get some crazy high mana availability to continuously untap it, and you have ways to gain life a lot. I think you'll do pretty well for it. For limited, I think it has a limited focus for it in limited. I didn't see really a lot of cards that utilized all its different abilities. Proliferate's probably the best, and then the card draw, although that card draw pays a pretty steep price for 4 life. So I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. I could be wrong for hitting this mythic this way, but it just doesn't really make that big of a impact that I can remember for limited cards. However, for constructed, I think this card could have some pretty good use. I'm going to give it a mid rating for constructed. A card that comes to mind that you could use this on is, let's say you're playing a Grixis deck and you have Solkanar from Dominaria United. I wanted to call him the Swamp King, but that is the Legends version of him. But before his last ability triggers and your opponents gain control of him, you can use this to just destroy him. And that'll take care of that problem for you. Also lets you proliferate, draw a card, and you're going to have more control over how much mana you have to be able to untap it. And plus, same with the life gain. If you're able to gain a lot of life, or you have playing a deck with a lot of counters, this could help you. So I think it's a pretty awesome utility card for constructed. It's going to take some pretty solid focus to make it useful, but I think for those type of decks, you'll find a good use for it. So we'll go low for limited and mid for constructed. Our next mythic is Sword of Forge and Frontier for 3. It's an artifact equipment. So this is looks like this is the red-green version of the Sword series that has been going on for years in all the Mirrored and focused sets or the Modern Horizon focused sets. It's equipped creature gets +2/+2 and it has protection from red and green. It's pretty good. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you can exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. Not bad. So if one of those cards that you exile from the top of your library happens to be a land, and you already did a land drop, you can take another land drop, and that way you don't lose both of those cards. And most often you'll probably be able to play that other card. And it has a equip cost of 2, so that's pretty good. I like this card. I think it's solid. I think I'll give it a high rating for constructed and for limited. I think it's pretty solid. I almost want to give it epic, but not quite yet. It's pretty close, but I think you're going to be able to play this in both limited and constructed and find a good use for it. The fact that it gives it your creature +2/+2 and protection from red and green, that's 40% of the color pie. And it's going to help you ramp into things and help you draw cards and play additional lands. So definitely worthy of the high rating, and it's true to its heritage as far as being a solid sword card. So pretty cool for a red and green sword card. So looks like that will do it for the artifacts. We've reached the end. There are only 2 mythics for the set, for the artifacts in the set. Pretty good way, pretty solid way to end the artifacts. Next up, we're going to probably be diving into the color now as we delve it deeper into the sphere of Phyrexia. And I believe the first color up will be red, so that'll be fun, diving into the Furnace realm. So looking forward to those red cards and seeing what more this set has to offer. But until then, if you like the videos, just a quick reminder, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You get a notification when new videos go live. And if you like the video, just hit that like button. It always helps the channel. And leave a comment if you like. I always respond to people who leave comments and enjoy conversing with the viewers. But I think that'll do it for this time. Thanks for watching the video. And I'll be back soon with the next video in this series. So take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.